What if I told you that in 1901, someone actually built the world's first underwater roller coaster, and it was simultaneously the most brilliant and most terrifying idea anyone had ever conceived? Before you dismiss this as impossible, let me paint you a picture of Victorian-era engineers who looked at the ocean and thought, you know what this needs? A high-speed rail system 30 feet below the surface. This isn't some modern engineering feat we're talking about. This happened over a century ago, when the Wright brothers were still figuring out how to get airborne for 12 seconds, and these absolute madmen decided to build a roller coaster that would take passengers on a death-defying journey through the depths of the Atlantic Ocean. And somehow, against all odds and basic common sense, it actually worked. The story begins in 1898 with a British engineer named Theodore Wickham, whose claim to fame up until that point was designing particularly sturdy lighthouse foundations. Wickham was vacationing in Brighton when he witnessed a peculiar accident that would change the course of recreational engineering forever. A section of the Brighton Palace Pier collapsed during a storm, sending a portion of the wooden walkway crashing into the churning waters below. But instead of sinking immediately, the debris created this bizarre underwater tunnel effect as waves crashed over it. Most people would have seen this as a tragedy. Wickham saw it as inspiration. He spent the next 3 years obsessing over the physics of underwater structures, convinced that he could create a controlled environment beneath the waves that would provide the most thrilling ride experience imaginable. His notebooks from this period, which still exist in the British Engineering Archives, are filled with calculations about water pressure, structural integrity, and something he called aquatic velocity dynamics. The engineering challenges were absolutely staggering. Remember, this was 1901. They didn't have modern materials, computer modeling, or even basic understanding of many principles we take for granted today. Wickham had to solve problems that wouldn't be fully understood by mainstream science for another 50 years. How do you create an airtight tunnel system underwater? How do you prevent catastrophic pressure differential failures? How do you build tracks that can withstand both the weight of a speeding cart and the crushing force of ocean water above? Wickham's solution was genuinely ingenious, yet completely insane. He designed a series of interconnected glass and steel tubes that would be anchored to the seabed using a revolutionary tension cable system. The tubes were constructed with triple-layer glass panels, each layer separated by pockets of pressurized air that would theoretically equalize the internal and external pressure. The roller coaster cars themselves were essentially miniature submarines, complete with their own air supply and emergency escape hatches. The construction process took place off the coast of Dover, and it was unlike anything the world had ever seen. Wickham employed a crew of deep-sea divers who had previously worked on underwater telegraph cable installations. These men would descend 30 feet below the surface every day, working in shift to assemble what locals began calling Wickham's Folly. The project attracted crowds of curious onlookers who would gather on the cliffs above Dover, watching through telescopes as mysterious activities unfolded beneath the waves. Local newspapers were divided between calling it a brilliant innovation and a death trap waiting to happen. The Dover Chronicle ran a series of articles with headlines like Mad Engineer Submarine Circus and The Underwater Railway to Nowhere. But Wickham pressed on, driven by an obsession that bordered on mania. He mortgaged his family estate, sold his collection of rare books, and convinced a group of wealthy investors that underwater entertainment was the future of tourism. The technical specifications of the ride were absolutely mind-boggling. The track system extended for nearly 800 feet underwater, featuring 3 major drops, 2 complete loops, and something Wickham called pressure chambers, where riders would experience rapid changes in their environment. The entire circuit took approximately 4 minutes to complete, during which passengers would travel through illuminated underwater tunnels, while marine life swam overhead and around them. The cars could hold up to 6 passengers each and were equipped with individual breathing apparatus, emergency flotation devices, and communication systems that allowed riders to speak with operators on the surface. Each car was also fitted with large porthole windows that provided panoramic views of the underwater environment. Wickham had even arranged for the installation of underwater lighting systems that would illuminate the surrounding ocean during the ride. The first test runs began in September 1901, using weighted dummies instead of human passengers. The results were mixed, to put it diplomatically. 3 of the first 5 test runs ended with the dummy cars getting stuck in various sections of the track due to pressure-related mechanical failures. One car actually broke free from the track system entirely and had to be retrieved by divers 2 days later from a depth of 50 feet. But Wickham was undeterred. He made adjustments to the pressure equalization system, reinforced the track connections, and added backup safety mechanisms that would theoretically prevent cars from leaving the designated route. By November 1901, he felt confident enough to announce that the world's first underwater roller coaster would open for paying customers. The grand opening was scheduled for December 15, 1901, and it attracted visitors from across Europe. Hotels in Dover were booked solid for weeks in advance. The event was covered by journalists from London, Paris, and even New York. Everyone wanted to witness this impossible feat of engineering, whether it succeeded spectacularly or failed catastrophically. The first paying customers were a group of 6 volunteers who had signed extensive liability waivers and undergone basic training on the emergency procedures. Among them was Margaret Whitmore, a 34-year-old schoolteacher from London, who later wrote the only detailed first-hand account of the experience. Her description of the ride is both thrilling and terrifying. According to Whitmore's account, the descent into the underwater portion of the track was initially smooth and almost serene. The car moved slowly at first, allowing passengers to adjust to the underwater environment and marvel at the engineering achievements surrounding them. Schools of fish could be seen to the tunnel walls, and shafts of sunlight filtered down from the surface above, creating an otherworldly atmosphere that she described as simultaneously beautiful and deeply unsettling. But then the ride began in earnest. The first major drop sent the car plummeting through a section of track that curved downward at a 45-degree angle, reaching speeds that Whitmore estimated at nearly 30 miles per hour. The sensation of hurtling through water at high speed while enclosed in a glass tube created what she called a feeling of flying and drowning simultaneously. The pressure changes during rapid elevation shifts caused several passengers to experience severe ear pain and temporary disorientation. The loop sections were the most intense part of the experience. As the car completed its first underwater loop, passengers found themselves temporarily upside down while surrounded by ocean water on all sides. Whitmore wrote that the experience was so disorienting that she genuinely feared the car had broken free from the track and was sinking to the ocean floor. The combination of speed, pressure changes, and the surreal visual environment created a sensory overload that she described as beyond anything the human mind was prepared to process. The ride operated for exactly 17 days before disaster struck. On New Year's Day 1902, a structural failure in one of the main support cables caused a section of the track to shift, creating a gap that was invisible from the surface. The morning's first group of riders included a prominent businessman from London, his wife, and their 2 teenage children. Their car became stuck in the damaged section, approximately 40 feet underwater. The rescue operation that followed was unprecedented in its complexity and desperation. Wickham and his team of divers had prepared for various emergency scenarios, but nothing had quite prepared them for the reality of extracting trapped passengers from a malfunctioning underwater roller coaster. The family was rescued after nearly 2 hours underwater, but the psychological trauma was severe, and news of the incident spread rapidly through European newspapers. Within a week, government inspectors had arrived to investigate the safety of the attraction. What they found was an engineering marvel that was simultaneously impressive and completely unfit for public use. The pressure differential calculations were sound, the construction quality was actually quite good, but the entire concept was fundamentally flawed from a safety perspective. There were simply too many variables that could go catastrophically wrong. The official report, filed in January 1902, concluded that while Wickham's underwater roller coaster represented a remarkable achievement in engineering innovation, it posed unacceptable risks to public safety and should be permanently closed. The structure was ordered to be dismantled within 6 months. Wickham fought the closure order for nearly a year, arguing that the technical problems could be resolved with additional safety modifications. He proposed installing redundant safety systems, additional escape routes, and improved emergency communication equipment. But public opinion had turned decisively against the project, and his financial backers withdrew their support. The dismantling process began in October 1902 and took nearly 8 months to complete. Removing the underwater track system proved almost as challenging as installing it had been. Some sections were so firmly anchored to the seabed that they had to be broken apart with underwater explosives, a process that probably created its own set of environmental concerns that nobody was thinking about at the time. Wickham disappeared from public life after the closure of his underwater roller coaster. Some accounts suggest he moved to South America and continued working on various engineering projects, while others claim he retired to a small cottage in Scotland and never spoke publicly about his underwater adventure again. His personal papers and technical drawings were donated to the British Engineering Society, where they remain today as a testament to the audacious spirit of early 20th century innovation. The location of the former underwater roller coaster is now a popular diving site off the Dover coast. Marine archaeologists have identified remnants of the original structure embedded in the seabed, including sections of the glass tunnel system and pieces of the track mechanism. The area has become an artificial reef that supports a thriving ecosystem of marine life, which seems like a fitting legacy for such an ambitious and ultimately impossible dream. Looking back at this bizarre chapter in engineering history, it's tempting to dismiss Wickham's underwater roller coaster as a foolish obsession of a man who didn't understand the limits of possibility. But that would miss the point entirely. This was an era when people looked at seemingly impossible challenges and decided to solve them anyway, often with spectacular results and occasionally with spectacular failures. Wickham's underwater roller coaster represents something important about human innovation and the willingness to attempt things that conventional wisdom says can't be done. Yes, it was dangerous, impractical, and ultimately unsuccessful. But it was also a genuine attempt to push the boundaries of what entertainment and engineering could achieve together. In an age before safety regulations, environmental impact studies, and risk assessment protocols, it was possible for one determined individual to undertake a project that would be absolutely unthinkable today. The 17 days of the world's first underwater roller coaster operated successfully represent a brief moment when the impossible became real, when passengers could experience something that had never existed before and would never exist again. Those few dozen people who rode Wickham's creation were witnesses to a unique moment in human history, participants in an experiment that tested the limits of both engineering capability and human courage. Today's theme park attractions may be safer, more reliable, and more thoroughly tested, but they lack the raw audacity of Wickham's underwater vision. Modern roller coasters are marvels of engineering precision, but they exist within carefully defined parameters of safety and predictability. Wickham's roller coaster was something else entirely, a leap into completely unknown territory with no guarantee of success and no clear understanding of the risks involved. The story of the world's first underwater roller coaster reminds us that progress often comes from people who are willing to attempt things that seem impossible, even when common sense suggests they should know better. Sometimes those attempts result in breakthrough innovations that change the world. Sometimes they result in spectacular failures that become cautionary tales. And sometimes, just sometimes, they result in 17 magical days when passengers could hurtle through glass tunnels beneath the ocean waves, experiencing something that no human being had ever experienced before.